Seth, I appreciate you joining us here. I want to talk about the role of comedy in general cultural conversations, because while I think sometimes it's seen as just entertainment, comedy plays another role. There's a truth-telling component to it, and I think that's probably part of the success of the Babylon Bee, is that while what's being put up and shown is funny, there's also truth to it, and it kind of stings even sometimes, even if it's your own group that's getting made fun of. You recognize there's something here that's truthful to it. So it's more than just entertainment. How do you play that relationship between the truth-telling and the comedy, almost entertainment side?
Well, it is a mix. The Bee's purpose, it's multi-pronged, right? So we are trying to make people laugh, but we're also trying to make them think and engage in a little introspection. Look at ourselves and throw our own stuff up on the wall with a projector and see if we're okay with it, and if we need to be criticized or mocked or ridiculed for our own hypocrisy or double standards or something like that. But comedy is the way that I often put it is humor as a vehicle for truth delivery, right? And what it does, what comedy does very effectively, beyond just entertaining people and making them laugh, I use the term comedy, but really I mean satire, because there is an element of comedy to it, but we're not just straight stand-up comedians just going for jokes. Satire is often targeted at the social cancers that are killing the host, society itself, and trying to make sure that we cut those out before that happens, right? And so ridicule is one of the sharpest tools that you can use to do that, because what it does is it exposes those bad ideas for what they are. So I sometimes summarize our mission statement, if we had one. We don't really have one, but I say if we did, it would be something like to ridicule bad ideas. That's really like the mission of the Babylon Bee, is to ridicule bad ideas, because bad ideas taken seriously can have catastrophic consequences. And we see that playing out in our culture right now. We see absurdity becoming not just popular, but sacred, to the point where these insane ideas like, oh yeah, you can be a girl trapped in a boy's body, and here's a surgical procedure that can fix that. We'll change your body to match your mind. Like these kinds of ideas are prevalent and permeating our culture. And part of the reason for that is because we took them seriously in the first place, instead of undermining them with humor and mockery. So that's beyond just making people laugh. I think that's the purpose of the satirist, especially the religious satirist who's concerned with those social cancers.
Yeah. I feel like we went through a phase culturally where there was pushback against certain politically incorrect ideas. Mm-hmm. And now I feel like we've almost shifted into an era where publicly no one's really pushing back, but elitists are. And so that's where there's censorship from tech companies and so on. So it feels like we're shifting the cultural landscape to where people are more accepting of open expression and accepting more things. And even if it makes you uncomfortable, we don't want to live in a world where you can't say those things. But now we've got censorship from tech companies. There's debanking going on. Where do you see the landscape as it is, and where do you see it going?
I mean, we've experienced some of that censorship ourselves, and there have been jokes that we're not supposed to tell. And by the way, we know that we're not supposed to tell them. We know that there's going to be a penalty for saying some of these things, and we might get suspended or have the tweet taken down, the post taken down. We're less concerned about that on Twitter now with Elon in the driver's seat. But it used to be an issue, and and it continues to be an issue on these other platforms. What's happened is a lot of the ideology that you have, secular progressive ideology that is baked into the terms of service of these companies, and so they are enforcing their ideology on everyone in a way where it's like you have to abide by the terms of service, which means that you can't, like, for example, misgender someone or something like that. And that's the joke that got us put in Twitter jail back in 2022 now, when we misgendered Admiral Rachel Levine and referred to Admiral Rachel Levine as our pick for Man of the Year,
right?
After USA Today had named Rachel Levine Woman of the Year. And that's the job of the comedian or the satirist, is to, when something crazy like that happens in the world, you have to push back on that. You have to make fun of that. And that's what they don't want to allow you to do. So the landscape isn't great. Elon's takeover of Twitter was a huge win for expression in these areas, because he recognizes the dangers both of censorship and of wokeness and these bad ideas, and the need for us to not just refute them, but ridicule them. So that was a huge win. But outside of that, you still have a lot of stifled speech. I think everything that happened with COVID and the misinformation that you weren't allowed to spread on these platforms, which turned out much of it to be true, illustrated the harms that censorship can do, and it continues to be a problem that needs to be dealt with. Ultimately, I would like to see, the biggest threat to speech used to be the government, right? The government's overreach, the government clamping down on free speech. The government still does work through the back door through these companies, but now it's really these privately owned platforms that have their own speech rights and are deciding, picking and choosing who's allowed to speak in the modern public square. Where's the law that protects us from that? And how do we balance that against their speech rights? So the landscape is very complicated. It's extremely nuanced. But right now, you are not really free to just say whatever you want without facing consequence for that. There is still a very good possibility that you will get censored. You'll have your account taken away. You'll lose access to your audience. And we still face those issues all the time.
And for you, your currency really is the platform, just the ability to get these the satire out and spread this message. So how do you, as someone who runs an organization where you're promoting satire, how do you handle when you get the backlash and you get censored? Because you have teams, you have staff, and your revenue is woven into those same platforms. How do you as a leader work through that?
Well, you have to choose what's more important. Is it having access to the audience and getting the revenue, or being willing to say what's true? And this is something that, it's a tough thing because we've had to make the decision ourselves. There's essentially two kinds of censorship. There's the hard censorship of these platforms actually taking down your content when they don't like what you said. And then there's the soft censorship that happens when you either refrain from speaking or take it down yourself. And I think the soft censorship actually happens a lot more than the hard censorship. People realize there's going to be a penalty. They might potentially get banned or have their lose their platform if they speak their mind and say what they actually think or tell a joke they weren't supposed to tell. That soft censorship is the really dangerous stuff, and that's what we've tried to avoid. We kind of have a policy against it at the B. It's like if it's a joke that we're not supposed to make, it's probably the one that we should be telling.
Yeah.
And come what may, we need to tell it. Our principles matter. We have to be willing to say what we think is true and push back on the bad ideas that we think are harmful, even if that means we'll lose access to our platform, our audience, our revenue. We do have subscribers and supporters who have come alongside us and have helped us at least generate enough revenue that I think we could survive if we lost access to one or more of these platforms. And not everybody has that, so maybe it's easy for us to say that, oh yeah, we'll give up our Twitter account. But that was very costly for us, too, when we made that decision to not delete the tweet they wanted us to delete, because we did lose access to a very large segment of our audience and the revenue that comes from that. But I think that people, if you aren't willing to pay any price at all for your freedom, do you really value it? That's really the question that I've wrestled with, is I think we have to stop caring what freedom might cost us and be willing to pay a price for it, or we'll lose it.
So what would be your advice to someone who's kind of the younger Seth, who's working their way up either in comedy or entertainment, or maybe they're a satirist as well, and they're barely making it along, but they know that they want to push that line? And I almost feel like there's a personality type to someone who does satire. It's when you realize I'm going to pay they don't want me to say this, or I can't say this. It's like, then I have to. They almost like, there's almost like a resignation to.
I like people like
then
that.
We will.
They're my favorite comedians.
You take the last step off the cliff and just, trust it to God. But what would you say to someone who's up and coming and struggling with this dilemma of, I know what I can say and should say and what the audience wants, but I also know the price I'm going to pay, and they're struggling with that. They want to be courageous, but they're maybe not there yet. What would be your offering for them?
I don't think that you necessarily have to have the large platform before you can go out there and really speak the truth boldly and push back on this stuff. To some extent, most of the efforts to censor people along these lines, a comedian telling a joke or something, they'll end up drawing more attention to that person than they would have otherwise received. And you could actually get on the map for that very reason. I do know that there are a lot of people who are hungry for real comedy, meaning comedy that's actually willing to challenge popular narratives and be politically incorrect, make fun of others and themselves in the way that humor is really meant to. Humor that actually has a target that could be offended by the joke is everywhere. That's just what humor is. There's always a butt of the joke. And if we treat humor as harmful, we don't allow it to have its healing power that it can actually have when we are willing to laugh at ourselves and each other. The world was much more unified when we were willing to tell jokes. And I think people have a hunger for that. They really do have a hunger for that. And you see the comedians that are actually willing to go out there and tell some of these jokes that you're not allowed to tell have the biggest audience they've ever had right now. So there's demand for it, and you might be a benefactor of the Streisand effect, where when they try to stamp out your voice, they actually amplify it. So I encourage people to not hold back, but that it realize that it may come at a cost, sure. But unless and until people actually start just saying what they want to say but are not supposed to say, we're going to continue to have the same problems just over and over again.
We're out of time, but thank you. I really appreciate you
Yeah.
carving out a little time here and talking with me about this.
Sure. Thank you.